A while ago, I was writing about those twin sisters of advice, Dear Abby and Ann Landers, and it occurred to me that I had never read the most famous novel ever written about an advice columnist, Miss Lonelyhearts. I decided to correct that omission, so I got a copy of the book from the library, which also included another well-known novel, The Day of the Locust. They were both short. I figured I'd read the two of them. The brilliantly titled Miss Lonelyhearts is very short. It's probably the shortest novel I've ever read. It had to be short because it's a one-dimensional book with very little plot and only one conflict, that being more of a philosophical tussle between his personal convictions and the sorrows, suffering, defeats, and disappointments of the world, which are conveyed to him in the letters he receives from the readers of his column. The man who is almost comically named Miss Lonelyhearts is nearly crushed by these letters. The book validates, at least in my opinion, the notion that it is not such a good idea to be handing out advice. There's something inherently wrong about it, and yet, because of supply and demand, it is done. It worked for Dear Abby. It's not working for Miss Lonelyhearts. He's in moral quicksand, sinking fast. He drinks a lot. He talks a lot about Christ, what he calls the Christ business. His heart, which is sometimes rather mockingly called his great understanding heart, is compared to a bomb and a congealed lump of icy fat. He gets punched in the mouth and hit over the head with a chair. He frequently takes to his bed and does not want to get out. There are many shadows and dreams in the story, dark, creepy shadows and bad dreams. He's compared to an empty bottle that is slowly being filled with warm, dirty water, and later an empty bottle, shiny and sterile. Miss Lonelyhearts, the advice columnist, obviously could use some help himself, but instead of that he gets his boss, a man named Shrike. Shrike is more his doppelganger than his boss, an evil twin who pours cynical poison in his ear about the hopelessness of his condition while forcing him to continue that work. There are several women, including one he's asked to marry, and Mrs. Shrike, and one of his devoted readers, a woman who is married to a cripple who can offer her nothing but woe. At the end of the book, Miss Lonelyhearts, convinced that he has become a rock against which the sea of sorrows can only lap and crash, embraces the cripple, certain that he can cure him with love. The cripple has a gun, and though it is not completely clear, it seems that Miss Lonelyhearts is shot and probably killed, falling downstairs with the cripple, landing at the feet of the woman he asked to marry, and is newly pregnant with his child. While I was reading this bleak, short book, I watched an episode of 60 Minutes, a special presentation it was called, meaning it was a rerun. They had a report on the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and I could see Miss Lonelyhearts transposed into Miss Make-A-Wish, working for them, giving dying kids all kinds of things, except the one thing they really want, which is to be cured and to live like other kids. And there was a health wagon which delivers free health care for rural people with no money and no insurance, and of course, despite their efforts, the people die anyway, something Miss Lonelyhearts would understand. Finally, there was the Giving Pledge, in which people with at least $1 billion agree to hand over half of it, or more, for charitable purposes. They get to feel like saintly do-gooders saving the world, or at least an untidy corner of it, while they struggle to get by on mere millions and pay no income tax. I could see Miss Lonelyhearts going crazy over that one, too. As far as The Day of the Locust, I had high expectations. There was the title with the ghastly biblical overtone, and the opening scene was nifty, finely disorienting, but after that, for me, there was nothing. Lots of unrequited love, the death of an old vaudevillian, a cantankerous dwarf, a wannabe film star who is a part-time extra, a phony cowboy, a child actor who is seemingly stomped to death near the end, a cockfight, and a riot, all of which was terribly boring and inconsequential to me. There was a painter who was working as a set designer and looked like he was the protagonist of the book, but then he disappears for a stretch, only to reappear for the shattering conclusion. I'm sure the book is a searing critique of our wretched culture as viewed through the eyes of those who, like the author, an Eastern Jew who took the name Nathaniel West, went to California, and specifically Hollywood, in search of fame and fortune, and instead came up with nothing, dissipation, or ruin. I didn't care. I found the characters ridiculous, the action repetitive, and their desires pathetic, which I suppose may have been the point.